Okay. Does it have any rationale? Wherever you have thicker grafts, it's probably better to use a vascularized ulnar graft. If you are forced to use truncal grafts of the ulnar nerve or the radial nerve proper, where there is a delay to intervention, where the proximal nerve injuries are there, like plexus, where the poorly vascularized bed is there, and where you think you need radiotherapy. CA parotid, you have damaged the facial nerve, you put a cable graft, and the patient needs radiotherapy. It makes sense to use a vascularized nerve graft. What it does is it avoids the central necrosis. It permits earlier Wallerian degeneration, and the earlier the Wallerian degeneration, earlier will be the axonal sprouting also, and it probably improves Schwann viability. So you can have the pedicled vascularized grafts, you can have a free vascularized graft, free, or you can have a vascularized nerve as part of a free tissue transfer. You can take an ALT flap along with a branch of the lateral cutaneous nerve of the thigh, or you can take a radial artery flap with a radial nerve also along with it, or you can do what is called a pedicled vascularized facial flap in which nerve grafts are placed. So that is somewhere like a via media. It is neither a fully vascularized nerve graft, but you at least give it a compartment which is vascularized to facilitate healing. So you think of that whenever you do any flap, pedicled or free, and use the concept of vascularized facial wrap at nerve coaptation sites. I have written wrong here. You know why? This looks very aesthetic, where the nerve grafts are all neatly applied to each other, but this is the wrong way to do it. You should, because the nerve graft has to be vascularized from the bed, the cables have to be separated from each other. It may look unaesthetic. I'll just give you a analogy of this. During my training and during my internship or house job, we used to be told by the orthopedic surgeon that if you have applied a cast which looks absolutely, aesthetic, definitely is going to have a compression. The dirtier a cast is, you're sure that compression will not occur. Something like that. If your the nerve grafts, cable grafts are separate from each other, lying any which way they want, it's probably better because the vascularization will be better. Okay. Within 12 to 18 months, the regenerating sprouts should reach the motor end plate or sensory end organs. Okay. Otherwise, what happens? End organs die and they cannot receive. This has been the classic teaching, but they have started re-looking at this and they have said that the failure of reinnervation is not due to replacement of muscle by fat, but due to axonal failure and Schwann cell failure. And this starts probably at 3 months, which is why you keep insisting that nerve repairs, the earlier that you do, the better. It is true that beyond 1 year, you don't expect muscles to recover, even though sensory organs, end organs may get innervated. But this process of diminishing returns occurs as early as 3 months. The cutoff point in this experimental rat model seems to be at 3 months. It does not seem to be of absolute importance to perform the repair of the nerve immediately, though, since the results of axonal counts between immediate repairs and 1 month delayed repairs are comparable. However, retrograde neuronal degeneration is already apparent at 2 weeks after nerve injury, and delayed nerve repairs could lead to decreased sensory recovery. So, even at as early as 3 months, your chances are becoming worse and worse. There is a way around it. You do what is called electrical stimulation of muscles. This is again a question that is asked by for PGs. So, what is the rule? Any muscle that doesn't have innervation, the bulk reduces by 80% at 4 months. And denervated muscles need direct galvanic stimulation, which is low intensity and a long pulse duration. How do they work? It is not only by stimulating the muscles and keeping them in a trophic state, but it is also because of reduction of edema, preventing development of contractures, and probably increasing the receptivity to innervation. This is not proven. Parodic stimulation is only used for innervated muscles. You've done a nerve repair, and you have expected that some recovery has occurred in a particular muscle and you want to improve on that, then you do a Faradic stimulation. Otherwise, all denervated muscles is galvanic stimulation. Nerve growth factors, just a word about it. It has been used in conduits for nerve grafts, and compared to autografts, it's much better, provided the length is less than 3 centimeters. Electrical stimulation has also been used across nerve repairs to speed regeneration time and quality. Then polyethylene glycol fusion, axonal membrane fusion repair. And they have found that what I told you earlier about spot welding of nerves, they found compound action potentials recorded distal to a 1 centimeter nerve graft repair up to 7 days after surgery. No Wallerian degeneration. This is something in the future. So if you are able to spot weld nerves, your regeneration is quicker, and you could as well detect, at least in the mouse model, effects of reinnervation within 10 days, 7 to 10 days. I'm going to leave it at that because, Sandeep, there is another part of the presentation, but I'll leave it. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to share it with you. I'll mail it to you and Lakshmi, and you're free to distribute it to anyone else who wants to read it, if they at all want to read it. I think it's
So
quite.
yeah, we have that group, no? So we'll put it in that. Plus, this particular talk, if it's okay with you, we'll have it in YouTube, because all these presentations, everything is put into the YouTube, sir, as YouTube. So people, even later on, they can actually.
What is basically left is some practical tips on how to develop an interest.
You can
And
continue, but this time is there.
is it okay?
Yeah, yes, sir. Till 8:30 we can, isn't it,
No,
Sandeep?
it will take 15 minutes, but anyway, I'll just give a 5-minute gap, and I just want any of the postgraduates to respond, at least to one.
So one question I wanted to
There
ask
are
you, sir.
14,
Tell
some
me,
14 questions, sir.
tell
Yeah.
me.
Suppose, let us say that there's a panbrachial plexus injury, closed panbrachial plexus injury, and then you have, at 1 month, we have actually checked out and we have found that there is in MRI that there is root avulsions, so pseudomeningocele, some CT, whatever. Is it justified to actually operate at 1 month rather than
Yes,
wait for 6
yes,
months?
yes. I have seen it in once when I was in Shanghai. A patient a month after the injury, he was operated. They didn't really do anything much. They got a funny method. They keep re-exploring patients, Udon Goose unit. But what I understand is, if the patient is completely paralyzed, the picture is flail upper limb, ENMG tells you that nothing is working. There are no associated other injuries like a vascular injury and stuff like that. And you have done an MRI which shows you CAT1 avulsion clearly. I would do it at 1 month.
Okay.
In practice, I don't do, but I would do it at 1 month with a proviso that if you are going to work in the region of the C8 and T1, be careful of a CSF leak.
Correct.
Because the pseudomeningoceles may, spill over onto the neck. And if you are working in that vicinity and you puncture, you better have a backup. The particular case that I saw, it just subsided spontaneously, probably because it was the collected CSF that came out. But if there is still a communication with the space, it will keep on leaking, then you are in a troublesome position.
Okay,
If you
sir.
have backup to handle that situation, you could probably do it.
Yes, sir. So
Now,
can I?
I have a Sandeep.
Yeah.
Sandeep, I have a question to sir. See, the same situation we have also come across, sir. See, the problem is C8T1 lesions you routinely explore and take up, or you prefer distal nerve transfers in C8 and T1.
No, our routine practice nowadays has been to do the Wang procedure. So I'm not sure whether I can I can really answer your question there. If I have a patient who is less than 30 years old, within 6 months of injury, no other comorbidities and all that, our routine practice is to do a Wang procedure,
Okay.
right? So we explore with the intention of doing a Wang procedure, and if we find that the C8 and T1 is not going to reach the contralateral C7, then we do an alternative. But to be honest, I think we have done only one patient 6 weeks after an injury. Only one patient. But that patient had a total root avulsion. And at that time, we had not been having adequate training of doing a Wang procedure.
Okay, we also do Wang procedure. But how is the results of the Wang procedure in the long term, sir, for you?
I have been reasonably happy about the shoulder abduction, about the elbow flexion, about the elbow extension, and the wrist flexion. Our longest follow-up has been only about 3.5 years, but I have at least 2 patients who can use the hand after the wrist has been fused.
Okay. Okay. So you mean to say that you use it for free functioning muscle transfer for the elbow?
No. We do the standard Wang's procedure with the transfer to the, you transfer the MABC to the biceps.
Okay.
No functioning muscle transfer, just a complete Wang's procedure. So that is the thing. But then the bottom line is, let us take it that all close brachial plexus injuries, pan plexus, the dictum is operate at 3 months because we have postgraduates here. So we can't really tell them about 1 month.
Yeah, 1 month. Exactly.
A couple of questions, sir, if I can just put it to you.
Yeah.
Sulekha Singh has asked, if nerve grafts acts as conduit, then why long length vein conduits don't give same results?
Okay. See, when you are putting a, why would you want to put a vein conduit when a sural nerve is available? You would probably do it only when a sural nerve is not available. Why would the sural nerve not be available? We could have a hypothetical situation that the sural nerves are absent or you have used up the sural nerves. But the fact that you have used up the sural nerves implies that it is a much more severe injury. So it is like you would have used a vein graft in a situation where the injury has been of such a severity that it's not likely to work. Okay, it is not a comparable situation. Nerve graft is the gold standard. Vein conduits have been used only in pure sensory nerves, and they have been found to give good results provided the gap is less than 3 centimeters.
I think something to do with neurotrophic factors also might be there, no, sir?
Yes, exactly.
No, true. You could always see. You could always say, I have a 6 centimeter defect in the forearm. It is acting like a conduit. Why put a sural nerve graft? Let me put just a vein graft. But that's a very silly reason to put a vein graft in a situation where you have a nerve graft.
Correct.
So you would just use a light tissue to repair a light tissue, and you would use vein graft only when nothing else is available. The only other, far-fetched reason could be that your patient does not want donor site morbidity.
True.
Which is highly unlikely for a patient with a, incapacitating nerve injury.
Yeah.
I think the thought should not cross the mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Sir, Dr. Vamsidharan has asked another question, sir. Does brain plasticity have a role in nerve injuries? If yes, can it be used in clinical practice? I think he must be mentioning about adults or OBPAs. I'm not sure about that.
Some amount of plasticity occurs in all people, but since I don't have much experience in functional MRIs and all that, I really don't think I'm qualified enough to talk about it. Obviously, plasticity will be better in the younger patients. Plasticity definitely has a role, but how that is going to change your practice, I don't know. Whether it has any.
Yeah. Can I answer this, sir? I mean, because we have started doing 1 or 2 functional MRIs nowadays. Like I mean, with the SPICE software. The thing is, for peripheral nerve injuries, it is not. I mean, they say that it is not worked out well. So the brain plasticity, maybe the See, for example, there are certain papers which say that if there is a plexus injury or something like that, in the brain level representation, the adjoining area slowly gets reduced, where there is a representation that gets reduced and then it is overlapped by the other area. But clinically, it is not transplanted into the same kind of results which we are getting, especially even with the peripheral nerve injuries and other things.
No,
That is the issue.
what you say stands to reason, because the greater the degree of insult, the greater is the ability of the brain to compensate, because it has to
Yes.
make up for what it has lost.
Yeah.
Who is the person who asked the question? The name, Sandeep?
Vamsidharan Kumar.
Vamsidharan from?
Safdarjung first.
Okay.
Safdarjung,
Vamsidharan,
Delhi.
I will give you another quirky answer which you won't find other examiners telling. Please read Phantoms in the Brain by V. Ramachandran. Read that.
Yeah. I've read partly, but it is too
By
quirky.
the way, Sandeep, I finished Sapolsky,
Okay.
the book I brought when I came to Cochin. Yeah,
So
let's
next
continue.
question, sir. Joseph
Yeah.
Katadi is asking, what are the nerves that can be used as vascular nerve graft?
Vascularized nerve graft. I have used the vascularized nerve graft, as a medical procedure in electrical burns of the forearm. Two-stage vascularized ulnar nerve. I have used it once or twice with not much conviction in brachial plexus injuries earlier in my practice.
Yeah.
But now
Yes,
I
sir.
really don't. I really
About 10
don't.
years back, we also have used it in like 4-5 cases, but we were not happy
Yeah.
with the.
If I really have to do it, I would still do it for electrical burns of the forearm, where I would use it like a pedicled procedure. And
So I
maybe
think-
there is an indication of vascularized nerve graft in sciatic nerve injuries. I don't have experience, because sciatic nerve injuries are notorious regarding recovery, whatever you do. There, maybe it will help.
Yes, sir. So when you came to nerve electrical injuries, Vamsidharan has asked another question. Electrical contact burns. How to assess the proximal and viability? Do the nerves exhibit skip lesions? How to manage in such situations?
There is no shortcut for this. Point number one. A lot of importance was given to the widest tissue damage occur in electrical burns, high voltage. I mean 11 kV and above. There was a concept that it is basically due to electrons flowing in the nerve at one time. And the possibility of skip lesions was ascribed to that fact. As the electron keeps on jumping in the proximal end of the nerve, it will cause damage wherever it occurs. Subsequently, it has been proved that most of the reason for these injured nerves is because of the heating effect of current. And if it's heating effect of current, it is going to happen at that time when it's got heated up. There's not going to be any progressive damage, provided infection is not an issue. Let us take an example of a high voltage electrical burn at the wrist. The median nerve that is injured is lost. It's gone. A greater nerve can be lost if you leave the slough there, infection sets in, and you end up losing a longer length of nerve on account of infection fibrosis, not because of progressive damage on account of the electrical burns. So the same rules will apply. When you cut it, it's going to bleed from the vasa nervorum or from any accompanying vessel. And you find that when you cut it, the sprouting occurs beyond the epineurium. That is the only rule.
Okay, sir. So another question is there, sir, by Dr. Joseph. If there is only focal destruction in leprosy, can reconstruction be attempted?
What reconstruction? Nerve.
Yeah, I think he must be mentioning the nerve reconstruction.
I don't have too much experience with this matter. I've never done. I've trained ulnar nerve abscesses, Hansen's abscesses, and all that. I've never attempted nerve reconstruction. I don't think so. The only thing is, I've heard of anterior transposition or decompression neurotomy, or releasing the compartment. I have not heard of. I don't have experience in that.
Yeah. So, sir, shall we go to your last part of your?
Yeah, I'll just rush through.
Yeah.
Okay, so you obviously need, some rules to help you. Assuming that you're not doing nerve injuries, whenever I talk, I try to sell the idea of nerve injuries. Since I don't do much, I want other people to do more of it. So you just go through the stages. I want to do it. How do I do it? I'll try to do it. I can't do it. I will do it. It's very easy to remember. If you diagnose a grade 5 nerve injury tomorrow, operate yesterday. Okay. So this is something that has been ingrained in me by David Chuang when I spent, just 3 days with him in Chang'an. I went for a craniofacial fellowship, ended up spending 2 days with Chuang, and probably ended up where I am now simply because of what he told me, that with any nerve injury, the clock has started ticking. So that's why no amount of, wait and see helps as far as nerve injury goes. Exceptional cases, yes. But most of the cases, 90% of the nerve injuries that you see are straightforward injuries. The other thing is, everyone can test the FDS and FDP. It's not a big thing. As I say, it's not rocket science. Where you can have edge over the others is if you're able to check external rotation of the shoulder with gravity eliminated. So how do you do that? If you can check the serratus anterior in a pan plexus injury, if you can check the first dorsal interosseous, to cut a long story short, you don't test joint movements. You look for individual muscles. The concept as given by Last, where he gives a spinal level for each movement. C5 is shoulder abduction, 6, 7, 8 is adduction. That is okay. But that is not how you look. You have to test individual muscles. And you should know how to look for trick or compensatory movements. You should know whether the supinator is working or not in a 5-6 lesion. Because whether the supinator is involved or not is important to know whether the lesion extends onto the C7 or the supination is gone only because of C6. All those things you need to know if you test individual muscles. Serial observations are extremely important as these cases, all these 3 cases are 3 different situations where they have been treated conservatively, excluding the clinical observations. This was a injection paralysis of the radial nerve. As usual, it is a epitome of conservative management. The second one happens to be a supracondylar fracture with a median nerve entrapped in that. Again, patient landed up with us about a year or a year and a half. And this was seems a very ordinary abrasion in the medial region of the elbow with ulnar nerve dysfunction. Because they were not observed serially, meaning, is there any clinical improvement? If there's no improvement, or if there's no worsening or improvement, whatever, if it has reached a plateau stage, you have to operate. And that can come only by serial observations. Anatomical knowledge is paramount. You have to repeatedly keep on seeing. I was talking about that when this lady told me, double nerve transverse. Double nerve transverse sounds very elegant. But quite a few times, if you explore on the plexus at the rate of about 20 per month, you will find innumerable abnormalities in the distribution of the musculocutaneous nerve branches that will not permit you to do a double neurotization. There are already publications in that. But so anatomical knowledge is extremely important. This was basically a tumor arising from the infraclavicular plexus. So this is just to highlight that fact. Which nerve stimulator that you buy, obviously the one that you can afford. And now practically only the Indian one is available. Esculap has stopped manufacturing this. I'm trying to get my hands onto one. Can't. Any nerve stimulator, as long as it can, stimulate. It may not be very selective like this machine, but having this, if you're doing serious nerve surgery, where a tourniquet is not applicable, most proximal nerve injuries, I liberally infiltrate adrenaline saline. You can't repair a watch in a pool of ink. I hope anyone in the PG knows who said it. Cautery, bipolar and monopolar. This again is something David Chuang taught. Liberal usage of bipolar and monopolar and Liga clip application. That brings the operative time down. You can see nerves better, you can repair nerves better, you can finish quick, you can concentrate. All this helps much more than anything else. And be paranoid about hemostasis. Infraclavicular hematoma in a brachial plexus exploration. It happens. And for me, it needs reoperation as an emergency. Maybe I may not take it up in the night. I'll take it up in the early morning first thing. And I will always redo the repair or nerve graft. Because whatever fibrinolysin or material has come out will digest the nerve suture inevitably. And if you take it light, you have lost the game. You have to build redundancy in nerve repairs. Fortunately, the human body is already built on redundancy, but you never come to grief if you build redundancy. Redundancy means doing a little bit extra. There are two types of extras. Fascicular redundancy. When you take an you could probably match one intercostal nerve to the gracilis, but I'll never be happy on relying on that one. I'll always put two. I don't put three, but the intercostal to the nerve to the gracilis in a functioning muscle transfer, I'll always use two. So this is the fascicular redundancy. Maybe this is excess, but it is slightly little bit more than what this is, so that you're done. Longitudinal redundancy. I will harvest the nerve to the maximum length possible, not because I'm going to use it, because at the end, I make sure that I have a tensional repair. See, I have discarded length, so I'm not leaving it long, but I'm making sure that I don't run into a situation where my nerve repair is under a tension. So that is the redundancy in nerve repairs. The more that you repair, the better the result. When you have an ulnar nerve cut, take time off to repair the superficial branch of the ulnar nerve. It makes a difference. Median nerve, take time to repair the superficial palmar branch. Even the tiny, dorsal digital branch, if you repair, it's common sense. You're trying to restore normalcy, and you get practice on top of it. For me, when I have a wrist cut, people, residents, all of you would jump into repairs. The first thing that I ask my postgraduates is, can you close the skin? If you are not able to close the skin, you must have a plan to provide a skin coverage. Otherwise, everything else is a waste. This is paramount for me. You take it lightly, but this is probably the most important thing for me. There have been situations in which I have done flaps for the volar wrist only because I was not sure that I'll have a tensional closure, or I was apprehensive that I may lose a millimeter or two. I don't mind having an excess flap there, but I don't want it to give way. How do you build skill? Simplest way of building skill is, this is an amputation stump. If you get a chance to do amputation below knee, below elbow, above elbow, just don't let the orthopedic surgeon close it. Run there, repair the median to the ulnar nerve or the musculocutaneous to the radial nerve. This is a technique of, nerve-to-nerve suture, which may decreases the chances of amputation stump neuroma. But at least it gives postgraduates reasonable practice of how to do nerve suturing. Nerve suture is technically more difficult than suturing vessels. You can take it from me. Now, when your awareness for nerve injuries increases, you start seeing nerves everywhere. This was a small tumor, I think a vascular lesion. And obviously, we wanted to make sure that the branch of the digital nerve is saved. And you start, making diagrams just to show off your proficiency in your theater board. You start getting involved in it. This really is not really essential, but I have a different way of doing it. When you work, you need both knowledge and passion. Knowledge is what leads to science. Passion is what leads to faith. And only when faith and science come together, you have something called humanism. These are all the people from whom I've learned, actually. And this is Dr. Panupan in Thailand. I spent about a week with him. This is Yudong Wu, who originally described the C7 procedure, Shanghai. This is Dr. Wang when he came to Mangalore. This is David Chuang. This is Dr. Bhatia. This is Dr. Alex Musit. These are all the people I learned my plexus from. This is a favorite slide with me. I just replaced the Africa with plastic surgery. I'm sure all of you are aware of it. Dental, dermatologist, gynecologist, everyone is, rushing out to the human body. This is the only place, at least in our country, nerve injuries where we have the edge. 90% of nerve injuries abroad are dealt with by orthopedic surgeons. It is still not the rule in our country. So with a lot of competition, this is one place where you can make your mark. And you need to know that if you want to be a nerve surgeon, and only a plastic surgeon can be a nerve surgeon, you can't have a neurosurgeon do it. You need to know nerve suture, you need to know nerve graft, you need to know muscle transfer, you need to know neurolysis, nerve transfer, arthrodesis, everything. Tell me who else but a reconstructive surgeon can do all this? Not the neurosurgeon, not the orthopedic surgeon. Okay, they can't do a functioning muscle transfer unless they are trained in that. Okay, thank you. I'm not sure. Sandeep?
Thank you very much, sir. It is very, very informative.
Thank you, sir.
Last stretch was very informative because there's a lot of points. Yeah.
Sandeep?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yes,
I can hear you.
Thank you, Professor Srikanth. I have a small doubt.
Tell me.
Will you be doing at 1 year? Normally, when you are at the crossroads of 1 year post-injury, 1 year brachial plexus, what will you do in your consultation with the patient? Like, what kind of you'll discuss with the patient?
I can understand your problem because you work in a government setup, I think.
Yeah.
So you need to prioritize and you need to play God. Now, none of us likes to play God.
Yeah.
But if it is a young patient, less than 30, majority are young, no comorbidities, then I would definitely operate on him. Now, about 10 years or 12 years, 10 years back, I used to jump and do functioning muscle transfers for everything. And even now, I would probably do it for a patient at 1 year. I would still do something to neurotize suprascapular nerve and probably use a functioning muscle transfer for elbow flexion at 1 year in a young patient. I don't think your intercostals are going to work at that time. And this is obviously assuming that you're not getting any roots. Even if you do get roots, if you're lucky to get a C5 root, okay, I would still try to logicalize it this way, that I have the spinal axillary for the suprascapular. I use the C5 to the posterior division of the upper trunk or the posterior cord to try and get something for the shoulder and still do a functioning muscle transfer, but you need another motor nerve, which would probably be the phrenic. So instead I would do a phrenic suprascapular and I would do a C5 to posterior cord and I'll use a SAN to the gracilis for elbow flexion. And then obviously he's going to need a second stage functioning muscle transfer using the intercostal for finger flexors. Now this is something you can do in young patients.
Even
above 40, especially if he has comorbidities, I would probably not do it.
Even in private practice, the question of after 1 year, I mean, it's very difficult to predict whatever inventory available with that. It's very difficult to predict and say, will you experience the same thing, or how do you circumvent this kind of?
Fortunately, the kind of patients that we get, they come to us with a belief that we can do something better. In fact, I have a bigger problem convincing certain patients about not getting operated.
Okay.
See, it's far more difficult to convince them because they want to take every chance for a recovery. Now,
Yeah.
if me or my anesthetist feels that the cost-benefit ratio is not going to work towards the patient, then I tell them not to get operated.
Okay.
Right? I think that decision is probably something more difficult. The decision to operate would probably be easy. The decision not to operate is far more difficult.
Yeah, because at the end of 1 year, where you have limited inventories also, and to tell the patient with the limited resources, financially also, it's little difficult only. That's what I think.
But Adarshan, see, the thing is, with this particular, with nerve repairs, no, even if the patient is coming at 1 month, you are going to repair it at 3 months. Let us say that we are going to do a repair at 3 months. Even then, you cannot tell that 100% is going to work. You can, at best, we can tell the 75% chance of it coming back.
No, that will always say, at least to a certain extent, with whatever experience you have and whatever you have.
Possible result is 75%. You cannot, I mean, in your hands, if you actually see
See, this is totally a gray area, agreed. So
Correct.
definitely we have to say like that only. But at least in this 3 months or so, when they present to us, at least to a certain extent, we can try and do. But 1 year and 3 months when they present, delayed presentation, all those things, and with the limited resources, it's a little difficult. So that's why I just wanted to find out from sir that whether the same scenario he also faces. Like, anyway, thanks a lot, sir. Yeah. Tell me, sir. Yeah, please, sir.
No, I was just wondering what it's. There was a question by someone in diabetic neuropathy. Does sural nerve as a nerve graft have poor outcomes? Frankly speaking, I don't really know. But if you don't use a sural nerve, do you have any other option? You don't.
You don't.
So you have to keep your fingers crossed. This question is by Vamsidhar and Muthukumar.
So shall I try to answer, sir?
Yeah.
See, usually in diabetics, if upper limb is spared to a certain extent by clinical examination, I would like to take the superficial radial nerve or the lateral antebrachial cutaneous nerve. 1 or 2 cases I have done like that.
I have read something about this quite a long time back.
Yeah.
That nerve grafts from the upper limb have probably got a greater fascicular content than connective tissue, and theoretically should be better.
Yeah.
But they are seldom used in the presence of a sural nerve. Now, if your apprehension about the diabetic lower limb wound to heal or the sural graft material being concerned, you probably are permitted to take a nerve graft from the upper limb, knowing very well you are not going to get the same amount of nerve graft material. But you could probably
I've used it because the neurologist was little apprehensive, not the patient, because patient had symmetric sensory neuropathy. So he was a little worried about that. So I tried to utilize superficial radial nerve on an occasion. So that can also be used. And in one case, we have used a pedicled vascularized lateral antebrachial cutaneous nerve after it supplies coracobrachialis. That was in an acute injury. Acute injury. We try to, as you said, no, we try to, because that was a complete cut injury with crush, industrial accident, where and that fellow was an achondroplasiac. So we didn't want to do. He was a little short-statured fellow. We were a little apprehensive about doing anything in the lower limb will cause because he was very apprehensive. So we try to utilize the lateral antebrachial cutaneous nerve as the graft, but for the ulnar nerve crush injury. But as usual, whatever it is, the ulnar nerve has got compared to median nerve, the primary repair or the nerve grafting is, to a certain extent, the results are compared to median nerve, it is less only, I think.
Correct.
Right. I think we'll call it a day now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll call it a day. Yeah. Thanks a lot, sir, for throwing a lot of light. A nice discussion.
No thanks. No thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much for participating. And
Sandeep, Radhakrishnan, and Lakshmi, thanks to all of you for.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Thank
Yeah.
you.